So thank you very much for joining this kind of third part, but in the same time, those who are following us online and maybe in the recorded version are probably happy to know that we are here almost annually, almost with hot topics. And actually, I think it is a hot topic for us, for Baltic countries here at this side of the Baltic Sea. The big question of will it increase the security feelings or realities or maybe some other things we can list since there is the big upcoming enlargement of NATO and 2 more Baltic countries will join, Sweden and Finland. I know they hate when we call them kind of Baltic countries. No, they are not. They are different, of course, but we are happy to call them countries around the Baltics. And we are happy also to meet here 3 also very valuable researchers. Let's start with ladies. Kristīne Bērziņa. She's a senior fellow for security and defense policy in German Marshall Fund. Hello, Kristīne. Just say hello so we can be sure.
Hello.
Yes, we hear you very well. Thank you very much. And Mr. Jari Vilén is Finland's ambassador to Barents and North Dimension of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland. And this gives us a little thinking of what we will talk about, since yes, it is also a hot topic. I think not only Baltics but also Northern Dimension in larger scale. But also your good colleague Gints Jegermanis is one of our Latvia's best ambassadors and former ambassador, but in the different levels in the UN, in Sweden, in Denmark, even in Moscow, by the way.
I was not ambassador in Moscow.
Well, anyway, this was a very important position, right? In
I'm
your
ambassador to Estonia. If you
yes,
want,
I'm sorry, I didn't mention what a great country, Estonia. Gint, can I start with you, because you are alive here and I can touch you with this kind of sense. I don't know if you share it or you deny it, but I think in this side of the Baltics, like us, small 3 Baltic countries, might have the feeling that, great, now it's Sweden's and Finland's job to take part of security guarantees of Baltics as well. So this is the best value what could happen. So do people other side of the Baltics you think might share our wishes?
Let's see how to respond to your interesting question. First, of course, if and when Sweden and Finland joins NATO, it will, of course, significantly improve security of the Baltic Sea region and also in the high north. That's obvious. Everyone knows it. Most people agree to that. Do we really expect them to take care of our security? We think they can contribute. But there is already well-established system how the Baltic countries should be defended. As you know, there are these 4 battle groups. Now there are more battle groups, but initially there were 4 battle groups since 2017. 1 in Poland, 1 in Lithuania, 1 in Latvia, and one in Estonia. So Finland and Sweden, in fact, they should have thought about joining NATO a long time ago, but it was not possible. And now, because of Russia's unprovoked war in Ukraine, that seemed impossible just a few months ago, not a few months, now a year ago, let's say. All of a sudden became possible in just 3 months when Sweden and Finland radically changed their security posture.
But logically, you would agree, not only radically but also logically.
Being ambassador to Sweden, I often used to say to people who were willing to listen that if I were sitting in Moscow and reading Swedish security policy documents, I would realize that Sweden is on the wrong side. So technically they were not part of NATO, but practically they were enemy of Russia anyway. So there was no point of waiting. But of course, history and traditions matter
Okay, well now let's see how Kristīne Bērziņa from Brussels. I understand you are in Brussels, right, Kristīne?
In Washington.
In Washington. Well, anyway, congratulations. Even though you are in Washington, maybe you will be even more realistic on, we call it kind of, wow, now it's secure. It will be like internal lake of NATO, this Baltic Sea. Wow, what a reality. But then there is a Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg, and there will always be this traffic, you know, in international waters. So, and Russia is going to provoke us, great Swedish and Finnish and Baltic and Polish and German nations. They will do it constantly every day. So, how should we react? How should we actually?
Well, I think you're right that it's going to be a tremendous game changer to have Finland and Sweden join NATO. And I think in particular, when you do look at Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg, these are places where we can expect to see changes in the future. To have Finland and Sweden join, and let's hope that Turkey gets its act together as soon as possible, to have them join would, in the short term, already help with two very concrete things that matter also for Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg, which is the naval presence of both countries, which are very strong and very experienced, as well as air defense. So having the air forces that Finland and Sweden have complement very much more of the ground forces that have been improved, as Gints was saying, that since 2017, and having the battle groups. So this adds a missing puzzle piece. Now, what happens in Kaliningrad and in St. Petersburg after that? And after they come in, and as Russia decides to reconstitute its forces afterwards, from wherever we are and whenever we get to more of a stopping point in Ukraine. And Russia will have to think hard about whether it reconstitutes at the same level as before in these places, given that the Baltic will be different, or does it move some of its forces to other places, Kola, and that's where, for Ambassador Vilén, I'm very interested in that dimension. How do we look at this as one area? It is, of course, the West and the North for Russia. How does that work in terms of a Baltic-Arctic trade-off? And yes, of course, these places will still be there, but how do they change? And these, Kaliningrad is not going to become demilitarized. St. Petersburg won't, but the S-300s that were near St. Petersburg were pulled and were moved to Ukraine. At the moment, there's far less presence than we had. That will change, that will evolve, but there's no reason to think it's going to be exactly as it was before. Finland and Sweden will need to be accounted for. And so together, as NATO, with Finland and Sweden in, we'll have to understand where those forces go, how the region responds to it, and have a very different daily security reality in the region. So I don't think there will be a daily test in the Baltic, frankly. I think it's going to just feel very different in a couple of years.
Okay, very different. I think very different will be probably speeches of Finnish politicians, at least Sauli Niinistö. By the way, Ambassador, you have to know that your president is in Riga today, and he
I'm well aware.
And we were listening to him, and he made a very kind of strong statement. He told today here in Riga, we should not guarantee to Russia any guarantees like proposed by French president earlier. When talks will probably start with peace-solving reasons in between Ukraine and Russia. So, knowing a history of your country, Finlandization, I learned it even in the school. Now, how the tone of your country, how the attitude of your country being a big foreign player, because you're going to be a big part of big NATO, changes already or will change, knowing the fact how long is the border of Russia and your country?
Well, first of all, good afternoon from my side too, I sincerely hope that I will be able to compliment the president's speeches and not contradict anything that he says, because then I'll be in trouble if I say something different. But I do believe that I can add a bit about what President also already said in there. And yes, you're right. The profound change, as already said, there's a profound change in our security policy assessment, and Finland will add 1,334 kilometers new border between the NATO and Russia. I thought it's 1,330, but somehow they find 4 more kilometers. But I'll try to find out where they are. Somewhere in the wilderness, I'm sure where you can find them. But I think what President already said today in Riga and what he's been saying before, mask has been fallen. The ugly truth is in front of us, and the unpredictability of Russians and unlimitedness, what Russia has been doing and is conducting currently in Ukraine is exposed to all of us. And I think it's fair to say that first time in our history, it is the people who decided that Finland should join the NATO, that it would be actually the additional security that we're looking for our future and our future generations, so to our children, in a situation when we have such an unpredictable neighbor as we have at the moment with the President Putin. But I think it's fair to say to you that while we are now looking for this additional security and we're doing it together with Sweden, Finland has never let the guards down. Let's be very frank, and President has been very frank with that. Since 1945, we've been preparing to defend our countries against the aggression from Russia. We never let our army to let down. We never scale down on activities or our strength. Today, Finland has one of the strongest armies that you can see in Europe. We have 890,000 men in reserve, including me. 890,000 men in reserve, and we have 280 of them as combat ready for support our borders and support our NATO alliance. And we have made enormous contributions and enormous increases to our defense budget, and we're doing that together with Sweden. If you're following the Finnish newspapers, you can see that we are making the purchases worth of roughly 700 million euros this year and 800 million next year. And as Kristīne said already, our combined forces that we can give to the Baltic security, to the Arctic security, but also broadly to the overall NATO security will be significant. Finland and Sweden together will be security contributors for all over the NATO, and we are willing and committed to do that. And we, as I said here, we are still waiting for the ratification from Turkey and Hungary, but let me be diplomatic and also optimistic. I think this time that we are forced to wait and we are still waiting has been also the learning process for Finland and Finnish citizens, that joining the alliance means security to us, but also security what we provide to others, which means that we have also a lesson to learn, that we understand the concerns what Turkey has, for example, what concerns Spain has also, that our security is not just the eastern border, but it's security on the Mediterranean side, it's security in the Black Sea areas, etc., etc. So I think that has been a good learning lessons that we have. But as also Kristīne said here before, the situation has completely changed. And I think it's fair to say, as you started, we are talking in the future Mare Nostrum. The Baltic Sea is our sea. We will control it. We will define how it will be used, and that has forced Russia, and it will force Russia to reconsider its own position in a very profound manner. And that, of course, is another discussion that is waiting ahead to us. But let me finish by this first time by saying that at the current moment, we do not feel threatened. We have unpredictable neighbor, but at the moment we do not feel threatened. And Russian response to our NATO membership actually has been surprisingly muted, both to the Sweden and Finland. How it will develop and what we will see in the future, I think depends very much what happens also in the further south from our borders.
When you say you don't feel being threatened, but on, let's say, second day of your real membership to NATO, I think I would expect your government sending telegram to United States, to NATO, thank you very much, but would you please send a permanent basis to my country, because then we really don't feel threatened. Will it happen?
I don't believe so that will happen. Finland has informed that they have no restrictions, and we are not putting any restrictions to our NATO membership, which I think is a policy guideline that you will see also in the future. We're willing to contribute, we're willing to participate in all the elements of the NATO, including also building the NATO nuclear security policy. But at the moment, as I said, we don't feel threatened is also very realistic statement to say to you. The bases and troops what has been stationed close to Finnish borders or in your country's borders, they are fighting somewhere else, and Ukrainians are fighting for our freedom and our security every single day in there. So that's why I mean that we don't feel threatened immediately. I think the biggest threat what we have is exactly the unpredictableness of our neighbor and policies of Russia what we have. But we will be contributing to our utmost capacity. Finland is always been known for the fact that when we make the commitment, we will keep the commitment, and we are, as said, are willing, of course, to support also our neighbors in the Baltic states, as been mentioned in here. But also, as an ambassador said to you previously, there's also other plans, and in the due time, whatever defense plans we'll have will be decided together in the NATO structures, and then we'll see what kind of contribution we can give. It's quite evident, as said, we have very large land forces. Our air forces will be formidable. We also have a naval forces, but future will tell what kind of contribution we will actually be giving.
Of course, but Mr. Jegermanis, I was hoping that Finns would ask for this immediately, and then it's easier for us also to ask these permanent bases, which was a kind of demand when we wondered what we would get from the previous NATO summit. So now we lost a kind of very strong argument. Why not to ask together it with the Finns for the next NATO summit?
No, I don't think that's the case. First of all, as Ambassador also mentioned, Finland has a very strong military force. If you look at the numbers, 280,000 people. It's 5% of the total population. If you put it on the Latvian landscape and map, I calculated it yesterday, and it turned out we would need 95,000 people in arms in Latvia. It's just to compare where Finland stands and Latvia is at this moment. Of course, it's too premature to say who and in what way is going to contribute in order to secure Nordic and Baltic area. The debate will start the moment Finland and Sweden will join, but we can see already some trends to that, and there are some interesting aspects to look at. First, when Sweden and Finland, they announced their application simultaneously, but the two processes were not so similar. Anyway, when they came to the conclusion that they would apply for NATO membership, Sweden immediately continued the trend that was obvious for a number of years. In 2014, when the Social Democratic government came to power in Sweden, then the defense minister, Peter Hultqvist, started to develop this called Hultqvist doctrine, which meant that Sweden was not going to join NATO, but they would want to secure bilateral security arrangements with the United States, United Kingdom, but of course increasingly with Finland. So Sweden and Finland were trying to increase their defense and military cooperation since then, and it has reached a new level. Then there is this Nordic cooperation, which has been in place, the so-called NORDEFCO, or Nordic Defense Cooperation Framework, and that's in place since 2009. But Sweden had two different security arrangements, one with Denmark and Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and the other one Sweden, Norway, Finland. So one can say that there is this a Nordic component, and if you look at the documents that Swedish Defense Forces submitted to the parliament recently, they, when talking about what kind of role Sweden might be playing in NATO, they also single out this Nordic component. So what we can see is that the Nordic countries are trying to form something together. which is already well developed. There is a tradition and knowledge and so on. So then you have the Baltic countries, somewhat separate, although both Finland, Sweden, Norway and Denmark, when they talk about these dramatic changes, they say that we need to focus on the Baltic Sea security, the Baltic countries and so on. So we are at the beginning of the new debate. It's too early to say how, but one thing that Latvian side and the Baltic countries should be trying to make sure of is that the High North, the Baltic Sea security are looked as one theater. We don't need to split this in two theaters, so there is a need for an increased cooperation, and this debate is just starting.
Okay, well, let's also start this debate in a sense of differences, which we should examine, but we will understand it only when this will be reality. So, Kristīne, from your point of view, can we say that these being so long neutral country with their own, DNS in the brain of being neutral, this is the value up until, and then it happens. And this Finlandization, that gives a little bit of we have to see how active they will be, how do they really behave, do they share because they never had this immediate need for a great public, needs to be in NATO. So it changes because of this war, not because of different natural willingnesses. Let's compare it with the Baltic countries. Majority of the people just knew we want to be in NATO, that's it, that's our main goal, since we gain independence. So do you think this is a kind of different type of family members in new countries?
Well, I think they are different. They are different from each other. Also, I think we always put Finland and Sweden in the same basket, and they're not the same country. And the inclinations and the willingness to fight could be different also between the two. And so I think being a frontline state fundamentally has a different characteristic than not. And so I would put in terms of behavior, activity, Finland in a slightly different category than Sweden, although yes, under Hultqvist there is a very different kind of history, of course, developing in Sweden, but the instincts and the muscles maybe are more exercised in Finland to have to respond to a crisis situation. You say these were neutral. My question, but I'm an analyst, right? So I don't speak on behalf of Finland, and we have someone here, but to what extent has Finland historically been neutral because it wanted to be neutral, or even just not a part of NATO because it wanted not to be part of NATO, or what of that was the best option given the circumstances and realities that were around it? The Winter War is incredibly well remembered in Finland in the many visits I've taken, and that much in the same way that in the Baltic states there is a memory of when things are not good. That matters. So I think that in terms of willingness to take on a challenge, I have no questions, especially in Finland's case, about that. And this engagement with others, this is different, but it is I don't think we should be especially concerned about that. There's a difference. Something that is, Finland has incredible, the 280,000 fighting force. In my sense, an ambassador, you could also clarify if otherwise, but that is, that is not a standing army. Your standing is something around a little over, between 12 and 13.
40,000 altogether, including conscripts.
Yes. So this is a significantly more modest force. And so if we look at, expeditions, EFP, other things, then what is available is not taken from this 280, but different. So in day-to-day, a different contribution, but I think that the Finnish contribution could be very, very significant in case of crisis. But caveat, we just heard about the length of this Finnish border. If something is going on with Russia, does it make sense for Finns to come with land forces south rather than look at that 1,300 plus kilometer border? Because again, if there is an active NATO-Russia conflict, then the entirety of the NATO-Russia border will have to be defended. And no one is better at defending Finland than Finland, because Finland has always thought they'd have to do it themselves. And so I think when you look at what would happen in case there was a conflict, I would not be looking to land forces. I think that Finland could do an incredibly good job of defending itself, and then also NATO, of course, if Finland is in NATO, and then contribute in other ways, perhaps not through land forces, to the Baltic states. And that is, I think, the estimation there. So yes, of course, and I don't think there's a philosophical objection. I think we just have to understand NATO differently if we came to that conflict situation, because then Finland would also be NATO. And if Russia is attacking NATO, then it's probably also attacking Finland. And it's not just an isolated activity in the Baltics, mostly.
Mr. Vilén, how surprised you are that Russia told few sentences that they disagree with reality, that actually you come as a member country of NATO suddenly. They were against it totally. They were, yes, but that's it. So you listen to them, and so if you are surprised or this will come as a reaction maybe later, that we should, they are masters of surprises in this continent for last centuries. So
that's true.
Should we somehow be worried that there is a silence from Moscow? I mean, we in the Baltics, we are even used to their aggressive speeches. We kind of, oh yes, they are sending new letters to, I don't know, UN, to Geneva or something. But since there is this silence, is that okay?
I hope
it normal?
I can hear, because I'm losing you time to time. I hope you can hear me.
But you probably understood the meaning of my question.
I lost the sound.
Okay. Sorry for this.
Can you hear me?
Should I repeat it, or you actually don't hear us?
Same was with Kristīne's speed, but I'm lost.
It's kind of, so maybe I should now pass this question, and then probably the signal will establish.
Can you hear me now?
Gint, I miss. Oh, sorry. Can we? Sorry. Even this. Can we please think about this?
I tried to answer because there was so many questions to me.
We should probably wait until the signal comes in a better quality, Ambassador, and then I come back to this question again.
So rephrase your question.
Yeah, could you please give us this sense of, is that okay that there is a kind of silence?
I can hear you
almost
now,
no reaction
from
Russia.
I don't think there is a silence.
But it's like I expected really aggressive talks. They are just usual.
Yeah, but even though Russia is preoccupied with fighting in Ukraine, doing all these nasty things there, let's remember that this same summer, Russian warship, Russian aircraft appeared and were crossing the Danish territorial waters and airspace. Russian military exercises in the Arctic waters. The Northern Fleet was able to carry out these exercises. So Russia is not silent. They are probably not saying too much, but they are preparing for the new reality.
But preparing for new reality, I mean, that's clear. They should. But do you think that we should wait a few more years after Ukrainian conflict and then see what is their actions against new reality?
Yeah, we will always be surprised, I guess. But the trend is obvious. NATO in the Russian view is an enemy. Therefore, there is no dull moment. We need to be prepared, and therefore, Swedish and Finnish entry into NATO gives us a new opportunity to exercise our defense.
And don't you think that because of constellations you describe and because of, I don't know, differences of how huge is NATO, that we are kind of, you remember probably French president talking about two-speed Europe when the Eastern Europe will go, but now go into, now maybe there will be a kind of not two-speed NATO, but like regionalized NATO or micro, something more intensive NATO here in the north and different type of NATO there in the east. And so talking about this niceties of Baltic Sea as a kind of almost internal sea of NATO.
That doesn't matter because NATO has this 360 degrees policy, so that all security issues should be taken care of. And of course, one thing what our defense establishment and in Vilnius and also in Tallinn are a bit concerned about. We shouldn't really regionalize NATO's security. Of course, there are regions and all that, but since Finland and Sweden are going to join NATO, we shouldn't rely only on the Nordic-Baltic security arrangements plus United States and UK and so on. We would not wish to see other nations go, and this would become just a Nordic-Baltic security area. The contributions that other nations make to these now battle groups and eventually brigades, these are very important, and so this is going to be an interesting debate when actually Finland and Sweden will join NATO, how to make this work.
Now Ambassador Vilén, maybe you can suggest us, maybe we don't know these coverage of many violation of a real border from Russian side, that they try to, just check whether green border is still, the NATO territory, or I don't know, many things which we used to, these small, nasty provocation from Russian side. Do they exist today, or do you expect them to have later on?
There's no provocation from the Russian side. The Finnish-Russian border is very calm and quiet and secure on both sides. And I can't say that we've been surprised. We've been prepared for the various scenarios, and we're preparing for the various scenarios. One alternative, as you mentioned, why Russian response to Finland and Sweden, to both countries, has been relatively muted, might be as just the reality, because the fact is that they do know that they would not have been ever able to influence anything, our decision-making structures, because it was the people who decided. 48 hours after Russian attack, Finnish citizens had decided to join the NATO, and Finnish decision led to the fact that also the Sweden had to make this kind of decision and change. And actually, it's interesting to tell you that, because you were trying to even provoke me a bit about it with these Finlandizations, and I come back to that. Finnish foreign policy decision has always been based on pragmatism, exactly as Kristīne said. And what we did with the NATO membership for applying it is part of our pragmatism. Actually, we should underline that for Sweden, this is a profound change in the DNA. Since 1809, Sweden has been based on the military neutrality, but due to the fact, the circumstances, what followed with Putin's decision, and first time in history, Finnish decision actually led to the Sweden also to make similar kind of concessions or similar kind of decisions that was in there. The President Koivisto, our late president who died, who actually led Finland to the European Union membership, he was asked once in Moscow when he was a state visit there that what is the Finland's idea? And he said with one word, survival. And I think this survival is something that we Finns and you in the Baltic states definitely understand what I mean. The small nation's way to survive. We've been surviving in last 700 years, 45 wars against Russia. We've been 700 years under the Swedish rule. I'm half Swedish. We've been 100 years under the Russian rule, and we've been trying the pragmatic way to survive. And now the decision, profound decision, is to join in the NATO in the current circumstances. It's not the decision taken lightly. It's not the decision for the short term. It is the decision that has come after very, very thorough consideration and democratic processes, and which means that Finland is fully committed to all the elements what we have. And as somebody said to me once, that if before the Finnish and Swedish NATO membership there was a signal cord in the Baltic states fence or the border, now you will have a fence there. And Finland is fully committed to defend our neighbors, defend our our own territory first. That's a self-evident fact, but also giving any support we can inside the alliance to do our alliances, the way what we can contribute and what is decided in there. I wouldn't like to go to any details yet because I think it's too early, but military staff and soldiers are making these plans in due time, and the commitment exists in there. And as also said by Kristīne, we will be contributing significantly to the common defense what we have, whether it concerns on the Baltic, whether it concerns in the Arctic, but not just that. And I want to really underline that. And one of the position what the president also has indicated, that Finland is not joining just for its own defense and just for very limited areas of NATO. We fully understand the responsibilities and duties we have for the whole alliance. And I think this is very important statement to say that we do see that the value what we have, we do see the contribution what we have to give. And when you talk about the will to defend itself, it's maybe interesting fact to tell you that today 87% of the Finns are willing to defend our own country, whatever circumstances, even if the circumstances are uncertain. And that comes from our DNA, that the Winter War in 1939-40 and the Second World War is our DNA, which means that against all odds, we are willing to defend that. And you can understand that with this kind of background, especially the war ongoing in Ukraine, is to us as a repetition what happened to our grandfathers, against all odds, against the aggressor who surprised us and against attack against us without no warning, etc., etc. So the support for the Ukraine and understand and sympathy is enormous in Finland at the moment. But as you said, the Finlandization was the choice of that time in that political space what we have available, and we very, very grateful in that respect that the momentum arrived when the NATO membership is possible to us. Finland has been lucky and successful in that we've been able to join and utilize the momentums with what comes in politics, whether it's EU membership, and now because of the mistakes of President Putin, we also have possibilities to join the NATO.
Yeah, sure. Congratulations with this, actually.
If I may, I would like to add something to that. There is a difference between Finland and Sweden. Yeah. For Finland, since the beginning of this century, there was always this NATO option included into Finnish national security considerations, meaning that Finland was prepared to go for NATO if need be, but they never thought they would go for it, and the population was really against it all these years, whereas in Sweden the picture was somewhat different. They never wanted to join NATO. There was not even a NATO option for them, and when Crimea was taken, Swedish popular support for NATO option was very limited, let's say roughly 30%. But what happened after Russia started the second war against Ukraine, so to say, in Finland, the population immediately started to support the idea of joining NATO, whereas in Sweden, they were still hesitating, and the Swedish Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, even in the beginning of April stated that joining NATO would destabilize the regional security. So the political debate there was somewhat different, and Social Democrats, for them in Sweden, that was no-go, because they always argued against NATO membership, and only in the mid-April, all of a sudden they realized that there are no other options but to join NATO, and only after that, slowly, Swedish population also started to support this decision. So, and in the Finland's case, when Parliament voted for NATO membership, only 2 votes were missing or against that, whereas in Sweden there are still 2 political parties who are against Swedish membership to NATO. So there are some interesting differences to keep in mind.
Of course. Kristīne, actually, if we keep in mind geography of Scandinavia itself, somehow many things are covered probably by installations are long-standing installations of US Army, for example, in Norway. So what kind of new thinking in these technicalities, installations, or maybe some niceties of, controlling more of a Norse, well, Canadians are good at this already, I guess. So from the point of view of global NATO map, where is this big plus to have Baltics like almost fully in?
Well, I think that there is a very different north. The ambassador is the expert on that. But if we've gone from an Arctic Council in which you had some NATO, some non-NATO, and Russia, now you have NATO and Russia. It is different. And the question I think happens, what does the Arctic look like in the long term? Thus far, we've had a very reasonable and expected conversation focusing on Russia. And in the short term and medium term, absolutely, that is where we need to look. But I sit in Washington, which means that any room that I go into, if China is not mentioned within the first 15 minutes, someone gets very nervous. And there is this China question, the Russia-China dynamic in the long term. So when we look at the North, if we look at the North Atlantic around land and sea and air, everything that is there, it has been in the past relatively quiet, right? There have been good ways. There has been security cooperation. You talked about NORDEFCO, other things. There has been non-military cooperation through the Arctic Council. But there's a sense that maybe the North changes. Because what is the implication of a Russian-Chinese cooperation, but competition in the North? Where do those chips fall? China's interested, but Russia is by no means eager to release its very strong hold on the North. And so, again, this is an area where NATO needs to be looking, and is, and we've already seen from the Bucharest conversations to before, there is a question of how can the alliance look more to the slightly longer term and the unpredictability of what happens. And there is a climate related, what are the actual conditions in terms of, actual space and accessibility, and then the political conditions on the other side, right? It's simpler to have NATO and non-NATO, NATO and Russian Chinese as someone that you need to worry about, but we have no idea really how that dynamic plays out in the North. And so I think what will change is not necessarily immediately a force posture adjustment, but I think a assessment of what would the scenarios look like in the future and what kind of force posture adjustments would be necessary. And again, a true look at what Finland and Sweden bring to the table with their own approaches and long track record of taking care of themselves for that reason. How can they teach more to NATO countries, especially looking at North, about what should be done? And those are the conversations we can expect from the moment of membership looking forward, with, I assume at some point also some adjustments in response to that. But I think opening up our understanding of a new space and the kind of challenges we may face there in the future.
Yeah. Yes, Ambassador, if you wanted to suggest.
Can I?
Here?
If I can
Yes.
continue a bit, because
Please.
it is such an interesting issue what Kristīne raised in there. We always been hoping that the Arctic would be the area that would be low tensions and it would be able to, in a way, stay its own cool calmness that it has there. I think the fact is, of course, that following what has happened with Russian aggression to Ukraine, also this situation has changed, and it's changed profoundly and will change profoundly because of the Finnish and Swedish NATO membership, as we've been talking. We should not be naive in the fact that we have a lot of interest, common interests, which one of them, of course, is climate change, because it affects all our lives. It doesn't matter what borders we have, but climate change is there. But let's not be naive. In the future, the Kola Peninsula will be the most important military concentration area for the Russian forces, nuclear forces, naval forces, air forces, etc., etc. That means that, of course, we need to have a balanced deterrence against them. And I believe that Finnish and Swedish contribution will actually bring this balance what we need also for the foreseeable future what there is. But the fact is, exactly as Kristīne said, that we should be able to look both in alliances in our own policy planning a bit further ahead. And this is exactly what China is doing. China's great strength is the fact that they can talk to 50, 60 years or 100 years ahead. And one of the facts that we have to take into account, in 2030 or 2040 latest, the North Pole will be open for sea traffic in the summer months, which means that the Chinese Navy has free access to the North Atlantic. So we have a completely different kind of change in security situation, which forces us to consider. And luckily, the United States and Washington, as Kristīne is there, USA at least has the possibilities and capabilities to make these kind of predictions and planning for the longer future perspectives that we need to have. And this is also something that, of course, we believe that we will have a contribution in there. I just want to underline that we do see that our competencies in the Northern Arctic, we do see our competencies in the Baltic, but Finland is not joining NATO to form one block in there, just a block for the North or the Baltic Sea. We are joining the whole alliance and taking responsibility all of that. I really, sorry to say, but I need to underline the fact that we join in alliance with all the responsibilities and all the privileges, of course, what belongs to that.
Yeah, we fully understand what you mean, because of course for us also the being present in different NATO missions is part of job. So do you think that let's say second day after your membership you will send some, you know, just someone who will be in Ādaži here in a local base, military base in Latvia, or well, you can make a choice, even, you know, Vilnius or Warsaw or Tallinn, Paldiski. So do you think it's needed for you mentally that being a part of the member, you immediately spread your missions around the continent, for example?
Now, this is the decision of course the president and the government to make, yeah. But I think the president has made very clear that we are committed to the various missions and tasks, depending of course our own resources. Yeah. Where and how that will be deployed, I think depends on a common decision, and I think we will of course look together with Sweden. Finland is already contributing to the NATO missions, and we will be contributing where and there. I think it's not about the place, but it's more about that what kind of competencies we have, where we can actually give a significant importance. Sure. I just throw from top of my head something. Actually, very few knows that Finland also has a very high level of knowledge in the space technologies or satellite information. So we can actually contribute to NATO in a way that we might not even think today, but I'm just giving you a hint.
Oh, thank you. So one more reason to have you in the family, and of course we cross the finger.
Kristīne wants to take the floor.
Yes, and we cross the finger that Turkish president will, you know, stop this, what he does now. Yeah. Well, anyway, questions, maybe remarks, maybe some, you know, denials of what has been said. I mean, yes, please, and just present yourself. The lady in the first row, please.
And don't forget, Kristīne wanted to take the floor.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Kristīne,
I was just thinking in terms of contributions. You know, a few people for a CT mission somewhere would be probably good. Just, you know, fairy dust on the alliance. We have Finland in the Baltic region, whether they are on the north side of the Baltic or in Paldiski. I'm not sure that makes a tremendous amount of difference in practice, but I think, you know, a couple of Finns in the context of some NATO CT mission could actually be very good politics.
Oh, thank you for this kind reminder. You wanted to add, probably?
Yes, two additional aspects. One, there is a lack of understanding, at least in the Baltic countries, of what's going on in high north and northern part of Scandinavia. And I think also in Finland and Sweden, although the interaction is going on, but there is sometimes limited understanding of local peculiarities. So I think one of the things that both Baltic and Nordic friends should be thinking about, especially Finns and Swedes, is that you need some sort of a presence. You don't need big numbers, but you need to see what's going on to understand the local mentality. And I also think that the Baltic countries should also be trying to send some people to some places in Scandinavian countries so that we have this interaction. Otherwise, we have our own security concerns in the Baltic Sea region, and we don't really know what's going on in the north. And we need to bring these two pictures together.
Thank you, actually, for a very interesting suggestion. I never thought about this. Yes, we have to send a mission to the North Pole. Yes. Please, your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this interesting debate. I am the Turkish president, ambassador in Riga. And I would like to react to your words about the Turkish president stopping this. Well,
maybe
first
really
of all,
it's time to explain.
Exactly. Yes. Let me say from the outset that this is not a political maneuver for Turkey. Turkey is trying to meet its own security concerns in its own region. So this is not really a theoretical issue for us. This is a real core security issue that concerns my country. Of course, the perception of security threats might change from one region to another. However, I would like to say and stress that the NATO alliance, the North Atlantic Alliance, the security is indivisible. That means there is no security concern that is for any ally's security concern that is less important than the other ally's security concern. Therefore, the indivisibility of security is in fact what made NATO a successful defensive organization. So far, my country, I speak for Turkey, my country stood successfully and helped the Euro-Atlantic security throughout the Cold War as being the country having a big border with the Soviet Union. And therefore, I think we are a very reliable ally in the NATO organization. The reasons of Turkey's reluctance in the Finnish and Swedish membership, first of all, let me say that we are 100% supportive of the NATO's open door policy. And I also think that Finnish and Swedish membership in NATO will largely contribute to the Euro-Atlantic security. However, there are other concerns. As you know, today the security threats are not only conventional. There is also a number of security threats which we call hybrid threats. NATO's recent strategic concept, in fact, underlined that there are two fundamental security threats to NATO. One was listed as Russia, but the second important one is listed as terrorism. My country has been suffering from terrorism for decades. And this concern of us did not find a lot of interest or was not taken very seriously by some countries, including Sweden and Finland. I'm very glad that some agreement has been reached between Sweden, Finland and Turkey and NATO. And we have signed a trilateral memorandum where there are provisions and undertakings by these two countries that need to be fulfilled. And until the time that we see these promises honored, then we will be happy to see these two countries join in, but we're still not there. I think these are very legitimate security concerns of an ally, which expects all other allies and to be allies to acknowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we cross our finger that everything you described will be sooner, not later, coming reality. So any more comments, aspects? Yes, please, Mr. Eglitis in fourth row.
Yes, thank you. Gats Eglīts, I'm the chairman of the Conservative Party, ex-minister of Social Affairs. Just a brief comment on in Finland. Finland is, I agree, a very, very strong, resilient country, and definitely knows how to defend itself. Since 1945 already, all this civil defense, military defense is really impressive. Something that I think Latvia would definitely have to have to copy. So definitely, and then I think Russia, being a thoroughly corrupt, ineffective country, they know this, and they know that making any moves against such an efficient and resilient country as Finland, you would have to think many times. But my question is about the Kremlin regime, and my postulation when the war started was that one sort of channel of influence to influence the Kremlin was through asset seizures of oligarchs, of business people who are close to the regime, and we know that a lot of assets have been parked in the West, you know, and a lot of them have been frozen. But the confiscation process has not started yet, and it seems it's taking some time. Do you think this will start happening, and whether that may have an impact on the long-term sort of survival of the regime? Thank you.
Thank you. So you have someone particular you want to address this question to? Everyone, please. So maybe Kristīne, you can start if you have this feeling of this is solved, or.
I mean, I think it's the question is, at which point is the pressure heavy enough to have some kind of influence, and so of course there's this ongoing pressure and the expectation that these asset seizures or other economic measures are going to have an effect in Moscow and across Russia. And yes, they are having an effect. The question is, what are alternatives that you have in the moment if you are Russian? You know, do you have something to turn to? When do alternatives arrive? What is the process of change look like, if there is a change, right? And is it managed? Is it unmanaged? I think it's simply the pressure is increasing in Russia in the sense of a pot. And is there a steam valve that opens? Is there something that happens instead? And I think we are watching and waiting, and the timeline for that is highly unpredictable. But I think that using these economic measures, of course, is essential in the very least in reducing the ability of Russia to have a highly effective campaign in Ukraine. So that is the first effect. And then the longer term, which could be at any moment, frankly, in terms of this long-term change, we'll see how it happens. But I think the predictability of it is very, very unknown.
Ambassador Vilén, can I surprise you by putting the same question but differently? Does your country has a special lustration or something to undergo? I mean, we were coming into a NATO family with, you know, cleaning of some persons we never trusted. They were asked to go, you know, slowly and silently, but to go, you know, from, I don't know, civil servants or any other structures. Do you have the kind of process, you know, to be accepted in the NATO, you have to fulfill certain security measures also, from not the point of view of you know, Turkish interests of fighting the terrorists or something, but you know, American small lists of something or something like this?
Well, we are fulfilling all the obligation when it comes to that, and I thank you for the Turkish ambassador for making the statement in there. As she said, we are in the process. We are planning to fulfill all the obligation which comes also on that, and I think the negotiations are proceeding according to the plan. To be very honest, the time frame what we have in our hands has already been surprisingly fast. So we are not behind on any schedules, and I don't think there's a schedule that has to absolutely fulfill. I think the substance is the more important. And as I said in the very beginning, I think it has been very useful for the Finnish political decision makers, civil servants, and also the public audience to understand, as I said, the uniformity we have in the NATO and the defense security concerns that we have from the various partners that we have in the future where we are. I think it's very important what the second question was very interesting and important fact, because I think I have a bit of past in the European Union too. So I think I have to put a bit of my European Union hat also in these discussions. What European Union has been able to achieve on this crisis is unbelievable. That when I talked to my previous colleagues in the External Action Service, they told me that if they would have made any of these suggestions that has now been approved in 9 different sanction package, they would have been fired immediately before the war had started. So let's be realistic and let's be proud of the fact that how European Union has been unified. And that actually is my main message and concern, how to maintain the unity of our member states, how to have the similar approach in there, because I think that is the only way truly to be able to influence the politics inside the Russia. When it comes to question concern, particularly these funds, confiscated funds, it is a very complicated international law and legal processes. But even in that, I think it is important that the European Union and EU considers, and EU member states considers what kind of approaches can be done, and we would have a then common understanding together with our partners from USA, Canada, and other non-European Union countries, that we would have a common stand, common position how to proceed in there. And I think it's important to continue these sanctions, and I think there will be in other packages if there's a need, and I think currently there's a need for that, and I think negotiation is ongoing already. We have to be realistic in the fact that these sanctions will take time, but they do have an effect. We do see step by step how they are profoundly affecting the Russian society, how they're raising the Russian society and citizens and people to understand what is going on and what kind of mistakes their leadership has made to them and to the whole world. So we have to be patient, we have to continue to support the Ukraine any way we can, and we have to be united.
Of course, yeah, thank you. Coming back to Mr. Eglitis' question, if you have a kind of nice description of process itself, which gives probably some niceties to this mentioned reality.
No, I think most of the issues have been handled. The thing is to seize any assets and properly deal with them. You need to do it in a legal way. We cannot repeat steps that other autocratic regimes do. We are democratic. We live in a democratic world. If we do something, it has to be according to some international legal regulations, framework. Therefore, there is a will. People talk about it on a very high level. Unless we together find a proper legal way, you can't do it, even though everyone wants it.
And we should be also proud of having Latvia's position, which is one of the most pushing country for this legal framework to be established.
But then, of course, there is other thing. We talk about international tribunal because these crimes cannot go unpunished. So there are many ways to go forward.
Yeah. Now we are turning to different aspects. So back to the Baltic Sea and the good things we will probably admire and enjoy and maybe even list, a long list of good things, or you can go on with bad things also if you want, for a new reality in the Baltic Sea of hopefully soon Swedish and Finnish membership. So please, if you have some thoughts, because the time is running out. If not, then the conclusion line will be driven by Ansis Bogustovs, the head of director of Latvian Institute of International Affairs. But before Karlis comes, we have to make applause to all 3 speakers. Thank you, Kristīne, and thank you, Mr. Vilén, and thank you, Mr. Jegermanis. So happy to see you, and you will see many comments on this recording later on. So hopefully many likes. Thank you.
Thank you much. Thank you for being able.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, very much. Thank you. Very dynamic debate as a concluding debate for this year's Riga Security Forum. Well, we started it 3 months ago with President of Latvia, Egils Levits, and we finished it with energetic moderation of Ansis Bogustovs. So, Ansis, also a round of applause to you for making this wonderful. We have wine at the back of the room, so I'm going to be extremely short. Final thank yous, of course, for most importantly to the partners, Friedrich Ebert Foundation, NATO Public Diplomacy Division, embassies of Canada, of Poland, of Spain, in Latvia, also to Strateg East and 5G Territory. Sorry, guys. And of course, my thanks, special thanks to Cynthia Broca for being the heart and soul of this project, and I am now being an avatar of hers, and I am cascading the thank yous of hers to Alexandra, to Martin, and to Krists from Friedrich Ebert Foundation for making this event absolutely possible for the whole 3 months, not only today. Final remark, next season is coming. Next season of Riga Security Forum, Riga Security Forum 2023 is coming next October to December, as usual, 10 more episodes. So in this case, please bring your ideas, bring your thoughts, bring your issues that you want to raise, bring your energy in, and send them to us, and we will be more than happy to go on and arrange the event also next year. So thank you very much. One more final round of applause for the 3-month-long project to everybody who was involved. Thank you so much. And wine and dine is over there. I think not dine, but wine definitely.